Reuters, a look at SBF's desperate efforts to raise $7 billion plus from Sequoia, Apollo, TPG, the Saudis, and others. FTX's internal accounting software hid FTX Alameda transfers. Related, Siddhartha Shukla, Bloomberg, a wallet linked to the suspected FTX hacker swapped around $49 million of stablecoins for Ether, taking its haul to 228,523 ETH and becoming the 35th largest ETH holder. Also related, Milky Eggs. Everything we know about FTX's collapse, losses are likely greater than $15 billion. Trades became increasingly risky. SBF was erratic, rash, and relied on stimulants and more. Also related, Wall Street Journal. Former FTX employees detail the chaotic days after its collapse. Mass resignations, learning news from social media, equity compensation going to zero, and more. I don't know how you propose to explain to those you are asking for money in order to salvage what remains of your business, how you can justify your accounting software that you use ostensibly for the internal operation of your business hides transfers between one area of your organization and another. I just don't know how you go to the Saudis and say, there was a good reason for this. But then, I don't know, maybe the Saudis do exactly the same thing. Maybe Sequoia does exactly the same thing. We'd all like to believe that they don't, but who knows? The only part here that I find worth sort of clicking on is the notion that the 35th largest holder of Ethereum is a suspected hacker of FTX. Do we know who this person is or persons? Do we have any understanding of their identity? Because if we don't, and they are a major holder of the cryptocurrency most people in the crypto and blockchain communities consider to be second only to Bitcoin, that doesn't bode well. Again, in terms of getting to that hallowed ground of I can pedal into town and buy a sandwich with cryptocurrency. Some people may find that to be an absurd example, but you want to talk about mass adoption of, a method of exchange. I continue to believe that's the best possible example. This person, or again, persons, managed to rob one of the preeminent crypto businesses, the one Tom and Giselle were willing to put their names behind, managed to rob them for $50 million. And we believe that that same entity is one of the whales of a cryptocurrency that millions of people have put their faith in already and are attempting to use to build Web3. That just strikes me as utterly untenable. How does anyone sort of factor that out and say, well, we've moved to a proof of stake model with Ethereum because it uses a lot less electricity, it's more efficient, it gets us closer to, being able to deploy Ethereum-based applications at mass scale. One of the major holders, one of the largest stakeholders, the entire Ethereum network, is an entity that's believed to have robbed, admittedly, apparently a not very well-run business, but nonetheless a business of $50 million. I don't know how you reconcile those two things. Washington Post. In an email to Twitter staff, Elon Musk gives an ultimatum. Commit to a new hardcore Twitter by 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, or leave with 3 months severance. Related, Casey Newton at Casey Newton. Sources. Last night, Elon fired around 20 employees who criticized Elon Musk in Slack channels, saying their, quote, recent behavior has violated company policy. No one should have to experience losing their job without, some semblance of sort of decency and civility and mutual respect. Those things aren't coded into law. They are cultural mores. Is that the right place to use that word? Elon shows time and time again that he doesn't operate according to the same set of cultural mores as most of us, many of us. And so, yeah, it is upsetting to witness an employer take terminal disciplinary action against their workers for their workers expressing opinions about their employer. But I think the two useful words to examine here are, one, ultimatum, and two, hardcore. We can quibble around which of those words sort of carries more cultural weight, which one feels mature versus immature, like however you want to describe them. But the thing that I think is interesting to evaluate there is, let's do the second one first. What is he trying to do? He's trying to take this business and make it significantly more successful than it has been to date. That was, again, not having read the terms of the deal by which he, collected financing. But you got to believe that that was the stated goal, was this is a business which we believe is significantly underperforming relative to its potential, and I want to own it in order to try and realize more of that potential, and in so doing, make all y'all some money. Otherwise, why would you loan me money to go buy the business? So the notion that Twitter needs to become a more hardcore employment place, that's a clumsy phrase, I think that's reasonable to the extent that we have no choice to live in a world where Elon owns the business now. If we could go back in time and he got out of the deal, or he never submitted a formal interest to buy the business in the first place, maybe we could have a debate about whether or not Twitter's corporate culture was sufficiently hardcore, or whether it was adequate by some other metrics. That's not the world we live in. The guy who owns it, whether you like it or not, whether you're happy about it or not, whatever you think of his chances, owes money against the promise of improving the business in a meaningful way. So creating a more, quote unquote, hardcore culture amongst the people who work there, I guess what I'm trying to say is many other business owners and executive leaders at many other businesses over the years have said similar things. They have used different language, but they have said similar things. There's a need to knuckle down and work harder than we have been working. So that's the hardcore thing. The ultimatum thing, for my money, is just a tiny bit loaded, because it's not an ultimatum. Well, I won't make that claim. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But let's look at what it actually is. We don't know the exact language aside from this word hardcore. Maybe there's a more descriptive, maybe there's a better description of what employees must commit to by 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. But the point is, they're being given a choice. You can commit to a significant change in the culture inside of Twitter because it has now a different goal than it had before Elon bought it. Or you can take 90 days of severance and walk. I don't think that's tremendously unreasonable. Could one describe it as cold, harsh, uncaring, severe? Sure, you could. Could the severance be more than 3 months? Sure, it could. But if he's not making himself clear that the Twitter organization needs to fundamentally change, and that those who want it to fundamentally change must get on board, again, could you expect anything different from someone in a similar position? A business which has had middling to negative performance in the public market for the better part of a decade is bought and taken private would you then expect the person that bought it to say, everything everybody's been doing is right on the money, and so we're just going to keep on keeping on? Why would you have bought the business? Why would you have taken it off the public market and away from scrutiny? I don't think it would make any sense. So, yes, you could call it an ultimatum, but I think it's also just a level of plain transparency, which is, we used to be like this, we're going to be like that now. And if you want to be a part of that, rock and roll. If you don't, you got to go, because we got to go do this other thing. Nelson Wang, CoinDesk. Genesis's crypto lending unit, which had $2.8 billion in active loans in Q3, suspends redemptions and new loan originations. Trading and custody units are unaffected. Crypto Malarkey. No. Mark Gurman, Bloomberg. Internal meeting. Tim Cook told German engineering and retail staff that Apple plans to start sourcing chips from a plant under construction in Arizona in 2024. This would appear to answer the question about the Foxconn facility being built in Arizona, whether or not it's being underwritten by another party. We'll see whether or not a state-of-the-art chip manufacturing facility can be spun up in 12 months. That'll be exciting. It'll also obviously be good, if it works, to see one of the most successful American companies in history start to bring some of its critical business functions back to the United States. So, rock and roll. Jay Peters, The Verge. Elon Musk says the new Twitter Blue will relaunch on November 29 to make sure that it's rock solid after pausing signups due to many fake verified accounts. Again, Twitter Blue as a subscription product that includes the handful of functionalities it does, a better view for reading threads, some sort of paywall hopping with certain publications that may be linked, different icons and color customizations for the app. But then the big two, and NFT profile photos. But the big two, being able to edit tweets as it's currently incarnated, 30-minute window, I think a maximum of 5 times tweet can be edited, and verification. This is the first major change to the business that under Elon's leadership. Even then, most of what Twitter Blue offers existed before Elon took control. November 29, to me, I think that date's worth paying attention to in sort of an arbitrary sense, just for some measurement, right? How many days from when Elon bought the business to November 29. How long is that? And then maybe we'll take the same length of time and examine what using Twitter looks and feels like the same number of days from the relaunch of Twitter Blue. I think that would be an interesting way to examine the progress of the platform thus far. So, CNBC, despite repeated assurances from crypto CEO Chris Marzalek, customers worry over the exchange's solvency. Crypto.com's CRO token drops 40% in the past week. Don't worry, we're totally fine. Business is good. You can trust us, says the person who just earlier this week had to admit that they transferred, I think it was hundreds of millions of dollars worth of coins to the wrong address. Oliver Knight, CoinDesk, an independent audit shows the Luna Foundation Guard spent $2.8 billion in crypto, and Terraform Labs spent $613 million trying to defend the UST stablecoin in May 2022. I don't know what the UST stablecoin is, but this, in the broad strokes of the headline, would appear to be another example of the cryptocurrency businesses recognizing that as more of them appear not healthy, it is bad for all of them. Maybe that's not what this is. I'm not going to dig into it. Matthias Bastian, the decoder, Meta AI, and Papers with Code unveil Galactica, an open source LLM for generating literature reviews, wiki articles, lecture notes on scientific topics, and more. Two things jump out at me here. One, I wasn't a particularly good student, so don't take my word for it, but I thought part of the reason to take notes is to employ as many of your sort of senses and brain functions as possible against the goal of retaining information. You know, the field notes, little paper notebooks. If you're an old internet head like me, there's a good chance you remember them. The tagline on those notebooks is, I'm not writing it down to remember it later. I'm writing it down to remember it now. If the lecture notes are something that are produced by a machine, are you learning as effectively as if you authored your own notes? I don't know. Maybe not. Second thing that jumps out at me, I wonder if they had to pay. Well, wait a minute. I'm thinking of Galaga. For a second there, I thought the name of the ancient video game was Galactica, and I was going to have a little chuckle at that, but never mind. Mike Trupa, the block. Matter Labs, which develops the Ethereum scaling protocol ZK Sync, raised a $200 million Series C, led by Blockchain Capital and Dragonfly, bringing its funding to $458 million. I don't have it in me to spend this much energy on cryptocurrency when there are stories about applications of blockchains. I'm all for it. I'll dig into those with a knife and fork. But another business that's there to, and admittedly, sounds as though what ZK Sync is there to do is increase the performance of the Ethereum machine, because that's what it is. So maybe it's worth digging into. Maybe I'll learn about ZK Sync and be more educated the next time they come up in the news. Allison Johnson, The Verge. Qualcomm unveils the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, claiming 35% faster CPU performance, 25% Adreno GPU performance, Wi-Fi 7 support, and up to 4.35 times faster AI performance. The chips get chippier. I don't know what Adreno GPU performance is. I assume that's just the branding name for Qualcomm's GPU cores. Faster AI performance, like all these things are good. The question is like, how do they get applied? Right? This is the advantage Apple has is it gets to design its chips knowing exactly what user experiences are going to be enabled by those chips. And the rest of the industry doesn't have that luxury. So while I'm sure there are plenty of people who are very excited at these increases in performance, I'll be curious to see whether anyone can draw a sort of through line from these improvements in Snapdragon chips and the application of that work in end user devices. I don't know. Claire Woodcock, Vice. Some public libraries in the United States and Canada are using open source software Musicat to offer their own music streaming services and boost their local music scenes. This sounds pretty cool. The thing it reminds me of is the Internet Archive, which if you've never taken the time to go play with, I highly encourage. The Internet Archive is this like beautiful idea that when I think about public libraries around this country and all of North America, or Mexico isn't mentioned here, I apologize. It would be great to see a world where the notion of what the Internet Archive does becomes an aspect of what all public libraries do. Because if you zoom out, what is the job of a public library if not to make access to human information throughout time easy to access, navigate, create value from. And while there are still a lot of books being written, and therefore there are still a lot of books being put on shelves in libraries, there's also a lot of information that never lands on books. You know, the interest in archiving one's tweets has certainly spiked in recent days. As silly as it sounds, maybe public libraries should be doing that job. Maybe public libraries should be mirroring popular public information that was available on the internet, but now is not. I don't know. It's a huge job to think about, sort of library science at scale. But to this point about, boosting your local music scene, it's a good thing. We should all be sort of boosting our local music scene. Live music is a great thing, and music as a form of human expression and art should be supported in communities of every size. I just think that a library is a terrible thing to waste. They are places where people can go to come together and to educate themselves and each other, and having so much information sort of live and die on the internet, I would hope that there's some set of librarians somewhere that see some utility in applying their expertise to making that information accessible to people in a library context. Miles Krupa, Wall Street Journal. Activist investor TCI, which has a more than $6 billion stake in Alphabet, calls on the company to aggressively reduce headcount and cut costs in its long-term bets like Waymo. I guess this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. The entire tech industry appears to be going through sort of a belt tightening experience. So it's something that everybody should be prepared for. I'm not sure what more to say. Max Chafkin, Bloomberg. A look at Alphabet X's Mineral project to build unmanned rovers with sensors and cameras for collecting data that helps agricultural companies improve yields. Sounds like it could be an interesting read. Certainly a good example of what you get to do if you are a business like Alphabet and can fund projects which don't have any immediate pathway to returning capital. So on the one hand, maybe it's the right thing for Alphabet to cut costs. On the other hand, are there any other businesses that are going to actively explore agricultural robots? I don't know. Politico, German, French, and Norwegian data authorities warn against Qatar's World Cup app, Haya, and infection tracking app, Etheraz, citing privacy and security concerns. House is getting sprayed for bugs. Yeah, the ability of states to author software that then can be installed onto the devices which track the movement of people. Turns out not every state is able to project the same degree of benevolence or respect to the people who visit it. So hopefully, if you're visiting Qatar for the World Cup, catch the fever, you aren't required to install software on your phone. Maybe if you have the opportunity before you get to Qatar, get yourself another phone. Install all the software that you're required to install on that one. Then leave it in your hotel room. I don't know. Stephen Church, Bloomberg, Voyager Digital's bankruptcy lawyer, says the crypto lender is no longer selling itself to bankrupt crypto exchange FTX. FTX agrees Voyager can pursue other bids. Crypto Malarkey. Nikhil Patwardhan, Money Control. Simply Learn, which offers upskilling courses, boot camps, and certifications, raised $45 million, led by GSV Ventures. Blackstone acquired a majority $250 million stake in 2021. We used to have institutions that were designed around educating people and equipping them with skills such that they could be successful in the job market. The trend over the last 10 or so years seems to be private businesses offering that skills training without quite the same level of sort of required investment of going to college. But trade schools, which I think is what things like Simply Learn appear to be, a good idea. Where the rubber meets the road, obviously, is there some level of confidence that someone can have upon committing to an upskilling course, a boot camp, a certification program, that it will have been worth their investment on the other end, that their ability to become employed will be improved. I don't know if any of these programs can make those sorts of claims or can back them up, but that's the sticky point here. But aside from that, good, we should keep funding them, because the traditional education system doesn't show a whole lot of signs that it is evolving with the times, aside from Zoom lectures. Jess Weatherbed, The Verge. DuckDuckGo launches app tracking protection in public beta on Android, helping block third-party trackers within apps. This could be interesting, could be useful. It also, I can't help but point out, is an example of where the platform builder could take on this responsibility on behalf of its users. Android doesn't do as much as it could in that arena, and while I know it can bring out the zealots to entertain the argument of iOS versus Android, to the extent that someone is concerned about third parties tracking the usage of the device that they carry around with them all the time, there's one platform that continues to make investments in that area, and there's one that leaves it to the open market to meet that need. Bloomberg. Microsoft plans to publish an annual review of internal harassment claims, heeding recommendations from a law firm hired after reports of Bill Gates's misconduct. Good. It continues to be nice to see Microsoft being both competitive, but also the sort of most mature actor amongst the largest tech companies. Claims of workplace harassment are something that should absolutely be taken seriously, and that any organization ought to be holding itself to a high standard for examining and, where necessary, taking action, and bundling all of that work up into something which can be shared publicly is a great idea, because you're going to demonstrate for the rest of the industry how things could be done, how they might be done better, as well as making it clear to everyone who does work at Microsoft or who would like to someday work at Microsoft that it's an organization that takes safety and respect in the workplace seriously. So good for them. The fact that this recommendation had to come apparently as a result of reports that Bill G didn't conduct himself as he should have. It's unfortunate. But the important thing here is the organization, which it's important to note, Bill no longer has any direct interaction with. He might still be the chairman of the board. I could be wrong. But that Microsoft continues to establish itself as a style of business which others ought to aspire to be. Keep it up. Josh Yi, Reuters. Tencent reports Q3 revenue down 2% year over year to around $19.8 billion, below $20 billion estimates, and plans to distribute most of its $20 billion Meituan stake to shareholders as a dividend. If it's not already clear how little I understand about the cryptocurrency industry, I understand even less about Tencent. There's the sort of free association in my mind of Tencent being the parent company of WeChat, the most successful super app, the thing which Elon has pointed to more than once as the type of platform he believes Twitter could grow into. I don't think that there's any reasonable way to compare Tencent's financial performance to Twitter's financial performance, if for no other reason than Tencent operates in the Chinese market, where the relationship between a business and the state is significantly blurrier than it is outside of China. So I don't think there's a way to make a reasonable comparison there. And aside from that, I don't know what Meituan, don't even know whether or not I'm saying that well, what that business is or why Tencent has a $20 billion stake in it. So I don't have a whole lot else to say there.